Welcome to this small tutorial on NewGrowth, my new add-on, where we get into a detailed look of all the drawing features. Let's draw a basic tree first. NewGrowth is available from the Add, Mesh, Tree and Tree menu. And when you start drawing, you will see that there is a on-screen help available that you can toggle with Alt-H. And the cursor starts out small. You can change this cursor with the plus and minus keys on your numpad. So Ctrl plus will enlarge, Ctrl minus will shrink it again, and Shift will make it softer, and Shift minus will make it harder, and finally Alt plus or minus will actually change the flow rate of your particles. We talk about particles in a moment. Let's start out with a fairly small brush with a fairly small flow rate, and just position the cursor somewhere above the 3D cursor. We click Alt key and the left mouse button, and we get a straight stem. This may be a little bit too straight for our purpose, so we select Ctrl Z or Ctrl Z to undo our change, position the cursor a little bit closer to the 3D cursor, and press Alt left click again and start to draw a fairly straight but not too straight branch. You can add branches later on by going somewhere in the screen, doesn't matter, and add branches to the crown. Now it's important to understand that you are drawing in a plane perpendicular to your viewpoint. So if you change the view, you see what's happening. And this plane intersects the 3D cursor. So now we add some additional branches to make a more symmetrical crown, and then increase the size of our cursor in order to add more twigs and trees and leaves to our tree. And we do this again by just painting with Alt mouse click. And then you see, we can even make it cursor even bigger to draw more quickly. Make sure that we are also distributing these things a little bit easier. And as you can see, if we make the cursor a little bit smaller, we're actually drawing light points. So if I start to draw here, you can actually see that I draw a trail of light points towards which the branch is growing. And these light points are positioned in a random manner, so the actual tree will also, or the tree branches will also grow in a random manner, as you can see here. Anyway, if you make a mistake, you can always go back, get to the result that you want, tweak it some more, and then if you're not satisfied, you can click either Escape, the Escape button, or the right mouse button. If you are satisfied, you can click or press the Enter button, and then you will get your final tree. Once we have generated our tree skeleton, we can finalize it. We can do this by going to the NewGrowth tab in the toolbar and then simply click Update Tree. This will generate a trunk mesh around the tree skeleton. You will notice two things. First off, there are lots of tiny twigs that are not generated. This is by design to reduce the poly count of your tree. If you do want to have those twigs, you can change the ratio in the auto pruning section. If you increase it, more little twigs will be added to the mesh of the trunk. Click update tree. As you can see, there are more tiny twigs generated. Only the smallest one that are connected to really big parts, really thick parts of the trunk are not skinned. The other thing that you see that some of the branches or twigs are very straight. You can increase the amount of modulation or curviness in those branches by changing the wiggle factor. That's a technical term. If you update tree, you will see that the twigs and indeed the trunk have more wiggle associated with it. So the next thing that we want to do is add leaves to it. You can add any particle system to this tree or to the generated leaves mesh that is parented to the trunk skeleton. But you can also use the bundled particle system that comes with NewGrowth. If you click on the Load Assets button, those will be loaded from a bundled library. And if we now select leaves, go to the particles, we can choose ash leaves, which is a particle system with by default only a few leaves in it. Now we want to generate, of course, just as many leaves as there are twigs and endpoints in our tree. So we go back to the trunk skeleton, select update tree, and now the appropriate number of leaves is generated. The next thing that we want to change maybe is to increase the density of the crown. By default, only on the end point of twigs and one branch segment in, there will be leaves positioned. If we want to have more leaves that go a little bit deeper into the crown, we can increase the leaf density and click update, which will result in more leaves more closer to the center of the crown. The final part before we have our finalized tree is to select the trunk, go to material and add a material to the bark. If we now change to the rendered view, we can see the end result. Now let's have a look at some more advanced drawing options. Let's say we want to create a tree with multiple trunks or a hedge or a bush. So we need to have multiple starting points of the main trunks. How can we do that? Well, let's first position the cursor somewhere inside or at the center of the grid. And now if we select Add Mesh Tree, we could start to begin and draw a tree. But what we want to do is to create a hedge. So let's see, this would be the first trunk. Let's say that we want to have another trunk point here as well. So we're actually going to create a row of stems or trunks. So what we do is we click the cursor here, click R or press R, and then we have another trunk here. And so at a couple of positions along this line, we create new starting points for the hedge. Of course, we don't have to draw a straight line. So now when we go back to our view here, we can start and draw new branches. So let's make a pretty large, large, not smaller, a pretty large cursor, position them somewhere above our hedgerow and click Alt and see what happens. Now you see that if I draw too quickly with too broad a brush, some of the stems are generated vertically, but the other is, well, moving about, and sometimes this will add an extra stem, which is not what we want. So what I'll do is I'll create a slightly smaller brush, positioned it somewhere over here, but still a few meters if you use Blender units as meters above and start to generate here. If I would draw it along, I will still get this horizontal branch. But if I start here, it still doesn't do what I want because I didn't start low enough. So, moral of the story, if I want to create a hedge, I should position my cursor, which will draw the imaginary light points, pretty close above the root points that I have generated. Those root points are of course recognizable because every root point already has a little leaf. So if I position it now, just a little bit above those roots, and I go over here, now you see that they are drawn from the root point. Still, because I'm using my mouse in one continuous motion, I still get this rightward looking pattern in those branches, which is also something I don't want. So I do it again, but now I do it a little bit more carefully. I just position them sometimes above, sometimes to the right, mainly creating more variation in my hedge. So with a little bit of tweaking, I can generate a nice looking hedge and then start adding extra leaves to it. I can make, now I have a pretty small or narrow hedge, which is okay, I think. But if you want to have a little bit more of a full hedge, you can of course increase the size of the cursor and start adding. So I'm not drawing continuously, I'm just repositioning my cursor and then click Alt left key and add some additional leaves and twigs to my, I forgot one here. So, and this way I can create a pretty dense hedge. It's bending a little bit forward, as it does when you have a hedge that is, leaning with the wind. At least where I live, you see a lot of those hedges. But if you don't like that, you can always, add additional. So maybe remember that you are drawing in the plane that goes through the 3D cursor and perpendicular to the cursor location. So you can add to your hedge until you are satisfied with the result. This is a little bit too much. So what I'll do is I'll actually prune what I'm seeing here. So if I zoom in a little bit and select this tree, so I position the 3D cursor on this branch, I can actually just cut off the branch by pressing the K button. And this way the hedge looks as if it's pruned, just like in real life. It takes a little bit of practice in creating the sort of look and feel that you want, but once you're there, you can create basically any shape that you want. Of course, as in every step, the final steps are actually finalizing the tree and tweaking the actual look and feel of the hedge in this case. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the add-on on Blender Market. See you later.